See if you can tell where I am today. The city. No, I'm not going to do a paranormal investigation in St Paul's Cathedral. I wish, you know, but you've got to be God to get in there. No, it's really the start of a little tour I'm going to take us on today. So I thought I'd start at this glorious landmark. So, what I really want to talk about is warfare, really. Aerial warfare, the beginnings of dropping bombs on people. Don't worry, this isn't Richard Holmes' War Walks. It's all has something to do with psychology and the social impact and the emotional impact of a new form of warfare, which I suppose we're all coming to terms with in the 21st century. But I'm going back almost 100 years.
It's fine for me, it's fine.
And not as you might think to the Blitz. Go back there for that. Without the sound effect. That is the Golden Boy on the corner of Cock Lane, just opposite St Bart's Hospital. Now, on this corner used to be a pub called the Fortune of War, which is notorious at the time, because that's where the resurrectionists used to operate out of, the body snatchers. They used to bring their cadavers from all over London to a special room within the Fortune of War, where the names of the body snatching teams would be written on various benches, and they lay out the bodies and ring a bell, and the surgeons from St Bart's Hospital would dash across and compete to get the freshest body so they could practice their techniques on. Now, the resurrectionist trade was prolific throughout the UK, particularly in Edinburgh, which is famous for the Burke and Hare stories. Burke and Hare actually murdered their victims to present them to the medical colleges, and there were similar instances here as well, including one where the surgeon reported his resurrectionist team to the police because the body he received was too warm and too fresh to have been recently innocently deceased, so they'd murdered him. And all this area was a field back then. It was all grass, and it said that the grass was black with the dried blood and juices of other corpses that had been dragged back and forth. It's ironic, really, because nowadays it's just around the corner from the Smithfield Meat Market, which is that over there. And this is Smithfield Market. Now, the market used to be much busier than it is nowadays. It used to have its own dedicated railway station with goods coming in from all over the country. You'd have salmon from Scotland, you'd have potatoes from Ireland. You also have tulips from Holland, which were at one point the most valuable substance on earth. And there are endless stories of traders going bankrupt when the tulip bubble bursts and committing suicide or being murdered by their rivals and being killed in industrial accidents. And I'll just do a quick walk past this place and then tell you why we're not stopping there. Apart from the back is closed. But yeah, one of the first overnights I did with my dad was in the cellars in the Cock Tavern. Actually, it was in that entrance. They've moved the entrance to this side. We've got some interesting readings, but it was the first night we were still establishing the baseline. And then we came up for the second night and found out that the guy who'd invited us to be there was not the landlord, he was just one of the employees, and the landlord had no knowledge of us being there. And when he found us there, he was fucking furious. And we are now persona non grata at the Cock Tavern, which is strange really. It's a shame because they do a really great steak. As you'd imagine, being right in the middle of Smithfield Market. One of the best steaks in London, but denied. It's the price you pay for your calling, I suppose. Moving on. And this is it. And you're thinking, bloody hell, Miles, taking us to St Paul's Cathedral, Smithfield Market, and or you come all this way to look at another street. Well, this is Farringdon Road. In July of 1915, Farringdon Road was almost completely destroyed by an air raid from a fleet of Zeppelins in the sky. So your First World War is when aerial tactical bombing started. And Gateshead and Sheringham and King's Lynn were all initial targets, but very soon London became the target. And throughout the war there were Zeppelin raids during the summers. It resulted in deaths of 500 people and over 1,000 people injured. And just think about that for a minute, that fighting a war against an enemy far away, you send your boys abroad to defend their homelands, and while they're away, the families are attacked in their homes, in their beds. And the impact of that on the psychology of a country as a whole, but of individuals, that leaves a traceable resonance. It's that kind of unjust or fearful or terrible death that leaves an impact behind, that leaves traces for us to detect and find. And there are, in the various buildings along either side, and one of the levels of the NCB is now the NCB car park, there are stories of young men running, screaming and disappearing to thin air. There are stories of children walking hand in hand in outdated clothing, turning around a corner and finding they're gone. Police have been called a number of times looking for children who have appeared very late at night by themselves unescorted. But interestingly, and even more than that, there were reports during the Second World War of a weeping German officer of high rank wandering through the Blitz. Well, most of this was on fire for the second time. And this figure had turned up in the late 50s as well, during the redevelopment of this area. And I got wind of another reported sighting only a couple of months ago. I interviewed one of the witnesses, and the uniform she described was not a Second World War German uniform, it was a First World War Zeppelin commander's uniform. And apparently on the very last Zeppelin bombing raid over London, the Zeppelin was commanded by the head of the German Zeppelin High Command, and he was killed in action over London. And some say the reason he led the attack himself was because out of the shame of what he had started, and that he intended never to go home. And he never did.